Each episode, we're going to dive into evidence-based strategies, cutting-edge research, and real-world insights to help you elevate your practice and empower your clients. Okay, so welcome to the Rehab Blueprint podcast. Okay, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a guest, potentially one of our first guests. We did do the strength episode, but that was a little bit different. So we have a guest today, Jaimie Bowie, who is an osteopath and a rehab specialist. So welcome to the podcast today, Jaimie.
Yeah, thank you.
And obviously welcome back to your own podcast, Giles. Good to have you.
Happy to be here.
I don't have my fellow Kiwi with me, so Luke is on holiday, Easter holiday. He doesn't have good reception, so he's not here. It's just going to be us three. But nonetheless, I'm excited to be able to sit down and finally talk to Jaimie. So, like I said, Jaimie's an osteopath, but we've done work together before. This is the first time Giles is meeting Jaimie, but we have all actually worked together because we've worked on the Y-strap paper. So Jaimie and Rob, Jimmy, and then Giles and myself, all five are the five authors for the Y-strap paper. So your contributions to that paper were really awesome, Jaimie. So thanks for that. And we're working on an exercise versus manual therapy paper, which you and Rob have been a part of too, which is cool. And I'm sure there's going to be more projects in the future that we can work on. And then we're doing the podcast. So it's really awesome to have you on. And I think for the listeners, first things first, give us a rundown of who you are, what you do, when you graduated, where you are now, and then we'll flow on from there because we've got plenty of questions.
Yeah. Well, so like we said there, I'm Jaimie. I'm down in the UK. I'm over in Somerset, which is like our West Country, so like the Southwest. I graduated 2 years ago. So I originally started in the military, then through just a minor injury, I ended up doing some rehab, and I thought, God, this is the job for me. Chatted to a few people, try to figure out how to get into that trade. And somebody mentioned go and do an osteopathy. So that's the short story of how I ended up in osteopathy. 2 years ago, I graduated, and I don't know, I've always had this urge to go and work in the NHS. So yeah, I kind of just migrated straight across. Through the degree, my degree was a part-time degree where you kind of get to work for yourself. So I've done a bit of manual therapy from probably year one. So for 4 years, I've done some manual therapy and then got into the NHS where it took off from there.
Yeah, and the NHS stands for?
The National Health Service. So that's like our medical care here. So it's like the free medical service we have over here where you can get all forms of medicine, well, apart from dentistry pretty much, but everything really. So I work in outpatient, so MSK rehab. Well, MSK, I can do whatever I want, but mainly I see traumas, pre and post surgery, a range then from acute to chronic. People coming in with savage back pain to somebody just with an OA hip.
And the biggest differentiating factor, I suppose, between a lot of people that are listening in the States or other parts of the world is in the UK and in New Zealand as well. Healthcare like that is funded, right? You can walk in, if you're ill, you can walk into the hospital and it's free. Is that right? Same for you guys?
Yeah.
And so you work in a hospital?
Yeah, I work in a small community hospital. So it's not like that sort of massive, big hospital. I work in a small community hospital. So in there, we just have like a minor injury unit, like small little dots of people that satellite in and out. But then we've got the MSK outpatients, which is there 5 days a week.
Yeah, and you graduated 2 years ago and you studied at the same place as Giles. We're just talking about this off air. Giles graduated, when was it again? 2000
Yeah, it's about 2000, I think 2012.
2012. Has much changed, do you think, since then, Giles?
What, from the degree or the university? I mean, the
Both.
University went dramatically uphill once I left. It was really coasting. And then obviously I left and then the standards went right up and so did the quality of the alumni and the graduates, obviously.
The program also changed, right? Because it went from a bachelor's into a master's at some point. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I did a bachelor's, and then they've offered the master's program, but I think they do offer a basic degree program there as well. I'm sure they do.
Yeah, so I just done the BOST. So I think, did you do a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Osteopathy?
Yeah, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Witchcraft.
Yeah, so I think then it went on to the BOST, the Bachelors of Osteopathy. Then now they don't offer masters now. Now they've just gone down to just a normal bachelor's degree.
But I will say though, it's quite rare for an osteopath to actually go into the National Health Service. Like 95% of osteopathy is private practice, and there's only a real small sliver that actually have the opportunity to work in the NHS. And the majority of people in the NHS tend to be obviously physios. So you are like a unicorn in this big corporate machine. So I was interested. So we've both done this 5-year degree, right? How do you think though that prepared you for work outside of the university setting in the private world and also in the NHS?
I think the private setting, I think it sets you up quite well because it gives you that sort of blueprint, doesn't it? You know, somebody comes in, it hurts when they bend backwards. You do some foraminal gapping, you know, a bit of this, crack it, and then
Rub it, wiggle it, whack it.
yeah. So it gives you that sort of if in doubt, you know, they teach you when it's not yours, and then they teach you when it is. Here's like a generic treatment plan. So at least if you didn't pay attention for 5 years, you can walk out and still make money.
Yes.
For the NHS, I don't think it preps you at all. Everything I had to do was off my own back, but they got like a chip on their shoulder where they really hate anybody or anything about the NHS. So, you know, you could go in there and say, "Oh, I've just watched a podcast on this," and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, but that's just physio stuff." And you're thinking, "Oh, the body doesn't know that I'm an osteopath." The body just goes, "I've got some patellofemoral pain. I need to help." You know, it doesn't go, "Oh, you're an osteopath. Please help me." Yeah, I think it helps you lots in private, but for NHS, it doesn't set you up at all.
Interesting what you were saying, Giles. So I'm under the same impression, right, especially here in New Zealand and Australia, that we don't have heaps of osteos, or even we can pick chiros into that, osteos or chiros in hospitals. So it is quite interesting speaking to you because it is something you don't usually see. So when it comes to, you came out of uni, you graduated 2 years ago. Between graduation and working at the hospital, did you do something else in between those two things?
No, I sat my CCA, so like our big final exam. So I sat that like in June, I think, maybe. I can't remember when you sit it, but I sat it like June and then applied like a few days later for my for the job in the NHS. And then before like my registration came, but even before I got told I passed, I'd had a job in the NHS, you know, so it was literally I just kept on steamrolling in.
And so since you've started, so it's been 2 years, what's one of the most important things you felt like you've learned, or what are some skills you feel like you've picked up over the last few years?
There's too many, isn't there? Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing.
I'd say, I was saying to Rob not so long ago, I feel like I've probably done another 2 degrees in them 2 years, but my rehab knowledge has gone through the roof. My ability to deal with things like clinical reasoning has gone through the roof. Understanding of pathways, red flags, everything, you know, like the ability to deal with. So when you're at the uni and you're in a uni clinic, you think you're seeing acute patients when you're not. You're just seeing you're seeing a chronic patient who's had a little bit of a blip. So when you go into hospital and you're seeing that true acute patient, you know, and then you get to learn just to be comfortable in that horrible sense, you know, that horrible position when somebody's in so much pain and you just desperately want to help them, but there's nothing you can do, you know, because it's just too acute. And I think it's given me that ability to sit there and just be able to clear him of his red flags, give him some good advice, and, you know, like manage them and then see them in a couple of weeks' time when I can do more for them.
Do you have restrictions on how you want to practice? I mean, would there be, if you were in a private practice, would you do things differently?
I think you would have to do things differently, I think, in a private practice. I have no restrictions on me.
Okay.
One of the first things my manager said when she hired me was, "We're hiring you to be an osteopath. You know, we don't, you know, if they want a physio, they'll just have another physio." Not that they hired me as an osteopath. We all had to do the same interview, and then they just take, so if they had 3 positions, you just take the top 3. You know, they hired me in as an osteopath, so they wanted me to be an osteopath. No, you know, it never ever is there a restriction set on you. But in private practice, I kind of feel the patient's the key, isn't it? The patient's paying you for your time, so you kind of have to, you know, play down to what they want. So if they want lots of massage, you got to give them lots of massage, otherwise you're not getting them back.
Yeah, I mean, we have this conversation a lot, don't we? When it comes down to, you have people coming in and wanting a certain treatment versus what you feel like would be the best thing for them. I know we talk about this again with you, with Giles, Luke, Rob. We've all talked about it so many times. And especially when you're an osteo or a chiro and people perceive you as that part of the health system where you walk in and you get cracked or you get mobilized or you get these manual therapies. I know Rob's always pissing and moaning about it, isn't it? Because he wants to do like these other rehab strategies and he wants to kind of educate and have these big conversations and he really wants to help these people, but they're coming in and they just want to be cracked. And so that's another interesting thing. What percentage of your treatment is like traditional osteopathy? What percentage is manual therapy, adjustments, mobilization, or are you doing other types of interventions? And if you are, what are those?
Yeah, I very rarely do manual therapy. I only do it if there's a need. Sometimes I do it to prove to somebody they got that range. So, like if you get something with an ankle, and I'll do some METs or some mobilization, and then I can show them it will improve, and then that's their buy-in for doing the exercise. Sometimes post-surgery, I'll do it just to see how much more I can get out of a knee. So, say I can't get full extension, I might try and get some more extension, and then do a bit of manual therapy. But generally, I don't do manual therapy at the hospital, not because there's any restriction. It's just in that I have 45 minutes for a new patient and then 30 minutes for a follow-up. And in that short period of time, I'll say to them that there's more value in what I can give you rather than just massage or mobilization or manip. I explain to them that it has very short-term effects. Some of the effects, it'll be gone before you've even got out of the hospital. Yeah. So I'll say to them, although that might be what you want, what you actually want is to be more functional, better in your daily life. And, like we always ask them what goal they want to achieve. So some people will say, look, I just want to be able to get through a day's work. I just want to play with the kids. I just want to do the gardening again. And then I'll say to them, so my job is to get you doing that. And manual therapy won't get you doing that unless I'm there with you all day long. And then that's enough buy-in normally, so I can get them doing the exercise rehab. I'd say most of my treatment comes is once I've screened them and made sure they're, like appropriate to treat, it's all about that education. I do a lot of education. We'll talk to them about, pacing, goal setting, graded exposure, how to manage blips, timelines on how they're going to get better, what's most likely going to happen along their journey. I'll tell them, like when they've overdone it, what the signs and symptoms are going to be of them overdoing it, how they can self-manage. Then I show them, from what we found out in a day, this is the best sort of rehab plan I have for them. Then I'll normally say, this is how you regress it. This is how you progress it in case I don't see you for a short period of time. And that's normally and then at the end, obviously, any questions, because they've got loads of questions at the end, because they're normally too scared to ask them at the beginning. But at the end, they've got gallons. So that's normally how my treatment goes. But very rarely do I do manual therapy.
Interesting. Obviously, we're both osteopaths, which are renowned for magic.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I thought you hated us.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting. We're renowned as a manual therapy profession, and as a graduate, you have a reduced number or amount of manual therapy you do in your clinical practice. So looking back at the 5 years, and I do this a lot, what is missing from the osteopathy degree or the chiro degree? What is missing that you think needs to be added in? And then what do you think would be of benefit when you were a student? Because hindsight's a valuable thing. And I look back at the degree and I think, Jesus, that could have been gone in 2 months. That was rubbish. That didn't work. That was shit. That was a whole. And I'm thinking what they could have added in, and then what I wish I'd have learned. So does that make sense?
Yeah. I generally feel like rehab's obviously massively missing, isn't it? If it's not, if it's not giving out knee hugs, that's it. That's all they've got: knee hugs and a figure of 8 for the T-spine.
Oh my god!
But mate, so I think
I'm triggered.
You look at a 5-year degree. Out of 5 years, how much of that 5 years was done on any form of exercise, rehab, understanding strength, movement? How much? None of it. We did none of it. Literally,
we've done a day.
Seriously, of a 5-year degree program, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, I remember once during the rehab lesson, you've got to mention not to mention names, but I remember saying to somebody, they were saying, "Oh, you don't exercise into pain." I said, "Well, that's not quite true." I said, "We have to exercise into an element of pain. Like what's a tolerable limit?" And they were saying, "No, Jaimie, you don't understand. You can't exercise into pain at all." And I was thinking, but they're already in pain. And if I can't exercise in pain, how are we exercising? How are we rehabbing? And then the rest of the lesson was, here's rehab my patient. Pick your top 3 exercises for a shoulder. Let's go. And I was like, shit the bed. I was just like, so then it was just like a pendulum. What is it? Pendulum rock the baby, and some weird, yeah, that's osteopathy for you.
I can't agree with you more. So for me, if they could get rid of a lot of some of the old pseudoscientific thought process and add in really good exercise rehab, strength conditioning, understanding how to rehab the patient, I think that would be massively important and improve. But then you start blending the professions somewhat, between, you know, all the others. It's sort of, we become less of an identity or unique, if that makes any sense.
Do you have a background in exercise science, PT? I know you talked about, but you used to do some of that when you were you in the army or you in the?
Oh, I've done a bit of both. I've done the army and the RAF.
Okay, so back then, I'm sure you would have been involved in fitness. The reason why I ask is because all of the stuff you're saying is so evidence-based. I mean, getting people to move, exercise, clinical rationale. I know you listen to the podcast and like we're all preaching the same stuff, all three of us. You know, we sit here talking about it on the podcast all the time. But a lot of that you wouldn't have got from your osteo degree. So that's the interesting thing. Where did you get all of that great information? Like, how did you learn how to practice that way when there's so many people out there, there's so many false prophets on social media talking absolute nonsense, and then you go in to your degree and you're learning a lot of nonsense too. And then you go to work for the hospital and you have to try to figure out, and it sounds like you've got a really good grasp on evidence-based care, especially the exercise science side of it. So I'm interested to know where you got that. Like, where does that experience come from? Or have you just picked it up over the years?
I reckon it's got to be a bit of both, you know, picking it up over the years and being in the military. You'd love mostly fitness. And then I liked CrossFit. I caught the bug. So then you start watching every sort of video. You know, I bought the Supper Leopard book. So then you're starting to learn what these muscle groups are called. Then everything with Kelly Starrett I watched at a time. So then you pick up a bit more. A part of that rehab I had to do for my ankle was a 3-week long package where they give you some education. You should pick up a bit more. Then the stone just rolls. And then once I got into uni, you quickly realize that they're just teaching you massage. And then I was like, right, cool. I've got to start learning this for myself. So then I started doing certificates. And then it just sort of snowballed from there. Then I picked up something else and then podcasts. And, you know, here I am now.
It's interesting, though. I think we've all come from very similar backgrounds. Felt that the universities that we went through, or Cairo, Osteo, didn't give us enough or what we actually needed. And so you end up having to do so much work outside of it. I honestly felt I learned osteopathy by myself with my business partner, Jimmy Michael. We would study together because we felt so disillusioned by what we were being taught. And I look back as a student and I always say to students that come on our training courses, look, the anatomy is great, the physiology is amazing, the case history is great, the differential diagnosis is great. You know, I like the manual therapy side of it, but if I could give you any bit of advice, it's go and learn how to be a personal trainer, some sort of strength conditioning, learn how to give good exercise, go and do some good courses, learn how to deadlift, learn how to squat, learn how to press, learn how to program. I think that's such an important thing. And it's funny how we've all realized that we have to do this in order to actually get long-term lasting change for our patients.
Evidence-based care.
Yeah, because like some of the stuff you got taught at uni, like so Rob was telling me, one of the clinicians at the time, if you get somebody with an ACL now, the NHS don't do anything, then give them crutches. So you don't have to worry about ACLs. It's just it will heal itself. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that's weird because we run specific ACL classes twice a week for people, or we do like you'll follow somebody along the ACL rehab journey for like a year. And, you know, look at college, they're saying, oh, we don't do anything. They just give them a set of crutches and tell them just crack on with life. And so now, you know, that year you have, say, 15 osteopaths going out. One of them might get an ACL rupture and they would say, oh, don't worry about that. No one will do anything for you.
Yeah, that's to hear that is actually crazy. It leads me to my next question. You're obviously very much part of a much wider machine that would be the NHS and your role in that, right? So you obviously play a very specific role within that and you've got a team and all that. Do you think the system is working? Like, is it functioning well? Or do you think that it's not at all and it needs, like, obviously there's always room for improvement, but I'm interested to hear your perspective on your perspective of the state of the NHS in general.
I think, yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's definitely overwhelmed. Yeah, I think all healthcare is overwhelmed no matter where you are in the world. I think a lot of the issues, especially like where I work, is misuse. So people don't use the NHS as it's intended. Especially in my department, people will keep coming back because they're worried that if they don't, somehow they'll fall out of the system. But you're thinking, but you're not in a system, you're just coming to me. A lot of the problems, I think, are people not abusing the system, that's wrong to say, but, you know, like misusing it. I've had multiple times where people have come in and said, well, I just want these appointments so that in the future, when I do need a hip replacement, I don't need to go through it all again. And you're thinking, but you still have to go through it all again. And so they're coming in with like either mild or no pain, taking away that appointment there. I could see like a code one, like an urgent 1 week referral. So you get quite a lot of that. So I think it is overwhelmed. It's being used wrongly. Yeah, generally, I think it does an okay job for something that's free. It doesn't do a great job, but it does an okay job, I feel.
And when you talked about getting patient buy-in before, obviously it's free. Okay, so the people that are coming to you, it's funded, right? So it's free to them, for them. It's not like it's someone's paying for it, the taxpayer, but it's, you know what I mean? So it's funded for them. Do you think, you talked about buy-in, do you think that obviously that would impact how people would buy in to the care? Like you talked about, sometimes you will need to use manual therapy just to get them on board a little bit so then you can move into the exercise rehab. Is that what you tend to see? Like, do you think that there is that kind of disconnect where people come in knowing it's funded so that it's harder to get them on board? Or are you seeing such hard cases that they're just ready to go no matter what?
Again, I think that's quite a mix. You'll see the ones that are coming, some people come in and to go, I don't know why I'm here, I just got a letter through the post. And then you're like, oh, right. Yeah, so you get that quite a lot. And you get especially the young people, you know, like some people have had shoulder dislocations or got some sort of instability going on. They'll come in once or twice and then just not turn up. So yeah, it's an odd thing. Some people come in and they're so dedicated that they just come in and want more and more and more. And they'll say to you, oh, I've done everything you've told me to do. Can we do more? And you're thinking, well, yeah, smash it. Let's go for it. So I think, yeah, it's hit and miss with the patients you get.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because by the time people get to me, they are like so compliant. It's something that I never have to worry about. And then even my business partner Luke's the same. He'll talk about how he'll see patients and they kind of just coming in for a rub. You know, they're not coming in to rehab or to improve or to fix the issue long term. They just kind of want a short term fix. And often we talk about this principle a lot on the podcast, but being able to move people from what would be a passive treatment into something that's more long term. But when you're a first grad and you come out of, you know, the educational system, or you came out of your degree, a lot of people are led astray. And this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast because myself and Giles obviously very passionate about trying to improve the issue at the source. So talking about treating patients is one thing, but then talking about the education is another, because you're trying to fix it a little bit higher up to the source. And obviously Giles does a fantastic job with OMT, and I'm involved in some of that because we're trying to do that. And the papers we put out and the information we put out is because we're trying to help those people, those new grads that come out and they're confused, because the first thing they do is they go on Instagram, they look for gurus. And this is the question I want to ask you, because I know you've mentioned in the past that you've had a swing from one type of thought process over to another. And if you can talk about kind of where your mindset was coming out of uni and where it's kind of progressed to where you are now.
Yeah, so coming out of uni, I'd probably say from like year 3 onwards, I was, I don't know which side you would say, left or right, but I was one side. I went down there, nothing matters. It's all about pain science. Lower backs, just get them moving again, tell them they're safe. It's fine. And that was it for everything. I was like, well, don't bother targeting your exercise. Just give them some exercise. It's all as good as each other.
Yeah, nothing matters. Everything's non-specific. Nothing matters. All that type of
all that nonsense. Yeah. And then you start, and then towards right at the end, I was thinking, well, maybe some things matter. And then I got into the NHS, and then you realise it all matters. You know, like you can't be you can't be on the edge of anything. If you're on the edge, you're not treating 90% of the patients. You're only treating that tiny spectrum of people, and you're not any use to anybody. So came back into the middle, done some more reading around subjects, and the people you're with, they're all quite level-headed, and then you kind of get mentored through. And I was lucky when I joined there. There's a good guy called Tom, so I got on well with him, and he was kind of my sort of mentor there. And yeah, so he squared me away. That and Rob, you know, you chat to Rob, and then Rob's like, oh no, I don't think so. And then I'm going, oh, I do. And then before you know it, when you're bickering amongst each other, you realise that you're actually closer, and then you bring yourself back into the middle.
Yeah, and the good thing about Rob is he's almost got like a photographic memory in terms of he reads something and he just doesn't forget it. I've sent him so many articles and he's digged in, man. He's got such a good understanding of that stuff. Now, whenever I talk to him about it, he just says to me, well, there's no point arguing with someone about, like, I'm just going to use McGill as an example, but there's no point arguing with someone who's like attacking McGill because they clearly haven't read his work, you know. And what Rob's done and what I've done is, you know, you don't just buy the book, but you flip the book to the end and you go through the references too, and you critically think on every reference. Not every reference in that book is going to hold up. I mean, there's some epidemiological reference on low back pain and workers that doesn't necessarily hold up, but like I went through and I critically thought, and that was my education. It wasn't just McGill's thought process. It wasn't just McGill's research that he did hands-on in his lab, but it was the studies that he chose to put in the back, you know, hundreds and hundreds of studies across the books, and they that's like, man, you really start to learn. And it's great when you've got somebody you can bounce those ideas off. Because like you said, especially someone like Rob, who was a fantastic bodybuilder, he would have learned a lot of things very kinesthetically through movement because of all the movement training and all the bodybuilding he's done. There's so much wealth of knowledge there that he doesn't even know he has. And I'm always asking him questions about that type of stuff. And sometimes I feel like he's like, stop asking me about bodybuilding because he doesn't value it because he's done it. You know, he told me the other day he threw all his trophies in the bin. And I'm thinking, that's crazy. I've got all mine here. I'm very proud of what I've done. And he's like, nah, it's just plastic. And I'm like, so, you know, you can tell like, it's often that way, you know, the thing you've done, you're kind of sick of, you don't want to talk about, but that's just so much value in learning biomechanics through doing. I just think there's so much value there. And that's why I always encourage new grads, don't just do the education and the academics, make sure you're moving as well. It's just important. But sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. But it's interesting how you find that swing. And I suppose that swing from the kind of nothing matters to everything, well, like, you know, everything matters when it matters. I think Joel Proskauer says, you know, nothing matters until it does matter, you know, and then when it matters, you better bloody understand it. But that swing makes sense because you would have been, how many patients would you see in a week?
Oh, crikey. About 50, maybe more than 50. I see anywhere between 10 and 13 a day.
So that's a lot. That's a lot. And when you've got 10 and 13 people sitting across from you in a day, you can't sit across from them and say your pain is not real or it's in your head or it's non-specific or what you're going through, you know, just go for a walk 3 times a day. It's just not enough. And it seems like that was very much the journey that you went on. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Well, there's only so many times you can see a lower back pain that's happened from somebody bending and twisting before you have to realize that bending and twisting might not be the best way to pick up something. You don't want to rubbish anybody's name, but, you know, I've done some pain science courses with biomechanics sort of stuff into it. And they talk about knee valgus and overpronation. But then, you know, you'll see somebody, you sit down in a chair and you think, God, your knees come in. And then they stand up and they look like a wobbly chicken. And then they tell you like, oh, I've got this knee pain. And then you just go, right, let's work on this hip. You know, you stop that, they come back in and go, my knee pain's gone. And you're thinking, yeah, well, maybe this does matter when it matters. You know, like when he had no pain, it didn't matter until he had pain. We sort it out and then it matters. And there's only so much of that you can, when I was at uni, when you're not really exposed to that, you know, you're exposed to, like I said there, somebody with just a small blip of chronic pain. You can buy into that. But when you're seeing people in pain and you can see the clear mechanism, you kind of bring yourself out of that sort of far border stuff back into the middle and go, right, yeah, cool. Let's look at this biomechanics. Let's actually target the rehab to fix the problem. Yeah.
When you're at university, it's an exchange of ideas. It's an exchange of philosophies or ideologies. And it's very easy to stack up an argument based on cherry picking studies, and you convince people to think a certain way, and then you actually see the patient, you're like, hang on, that's not making sense, you know. And this is exactly what you're saying, the twisting and the bending with correlating to lower back pain or knee valgus or all these various things. People want to be like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, cool, in a healthy population it doesn't matter potentially, but then we're seeing injured people. Locke would always say that. He was like, yeah, I get it, potentially it doesn't matter for this person, but everyone I'm seeing is injured, so it's likely gonna matter. In fact, when we were talking about PFP, I mentioned on the podcast that it's one of those conditions where this is a nice way to highlight biomechanics because it's often so impacted by it. And I remember that's a conversation I had with you. I remember you said to me, well, with PFP, movement does matter, biomechanics do matter, and it's often such an easy fix to go, you're doing this, clean that up, and then all of a sudden the symptoms regress or disappear.
No, 100%. You know, I wouldn't care how somebody gets out of a chair, but when they come in with lower back pain and then they sort of launch themselves forward and then they do like a hyperextension and then they're like, oh, like that, and I'm going, well, let's stop doing that. You know, let's stop doing that and let's teach you how to get out of a chair. You know, like let's teach you how to move from the hip properly. You know, that they just sort of use momentum, don't they, and just get themselves out.
They do like a big shift and a big heave. And I've just been working with a patient at the moment that was a key factor to the pain. And just trying to working on like sit to stand eccentric squats, like even just trying to get the distribution of weight over the midfoot, just like basic techniques that I learned for performance when I was a powerlifter, but they cross over to rehab and the average person doesn't know them. And like you said, they're okay until they're not okay. And everybody has structural changes, especially as you get older. And we know that when we look at all of the imaging, that everyone's walking around with stuff that's wrong with them. But whether or or not, that's gotten to the point where the capacity is breached and the light on the dashboard is blinking and they're feeling pain is one thing versus another if they're not feeling pain. Once the light goes off, and I was trying to explain this to a patient the other day, we understand pain is multidimensional. Once it goes off and you're feeling it, things change. That's the time where biomechanics matter.
I say to my patients, I work in marginal gains. Like I'll say to them, oh, let's try a bit of heat. I said, it's not going to do much for you, but it's going to make you feel a little bit better. Let's try changing, don't wear your Skechers, let's wear something more sensible, something with laces, something that's going to support you. Let's just change how you get out of this chair from now on. And then if I change enough 1%, I can group them all together. So if somebody said, oh, well, biomechanics don't matter, and you go, well, they do matter, no matter what, no matter whereabouts in that spectrum you must sit. So if you're a non-believer, they still matter somewhere. But it's just like for us sensible people in the middle, we know they matter more. So I like the marginal gain sort of way.
It's a good way, a nice way of thinking of it. Man, time has moved quick, so we're going to start closing. Giles, do you have any other things you want to touch on before we do that?
To be fair, there's so many questions. We were going to end up going off on some random tangent. But, I would say, firstly, it's lovely to meet you, and it's nice to meet like-minded practitioners. The reality is, you may have an osteopath on your T-shirt or chiro or physio, but we take their title, chuck it in the bin, and it's about learning from all of the professions. I do think osteopathy is quite flawed in a lot of ways. So is chiro, so is physio. And as you've said, you have to go from different professions, different aspects, and try to bring it together into something that you can see fit in clinical practice. So it's been great having a chat, but maybe get you back on for a further discussion for sure.
Yeah, man, that's what it's about, isn't it? Obviously, people like to have information that it's in small bite sizes. It's really difficult to do like a couple-hour podcast. People just don't tend to listen to all of it, and we really want to get Rob on as well, and then we'll get you both on as well to have a discussion. And what we should do is we should pick one really interesting topic and then just kind of all talk about that one thing and just spend 45 minutes on that one topic. That'd be, I think, a really cool idea.
Gosh, yeah, that'd be quite cool. To be fair.
So before we close, I will ask, what is something, a takeaway or a tip that you could give to people that have just graduated? So I always say this to the guests, so we always kind of go back to this. What is something tangible or some advice you could give to that person that's just graduated, they're out in the workforce, and they're really just trying to figure out what's up or down and move forward?
That one person that you looked up to in university, don't hold what they told you at university to what happens in real life. So sometimes people, in clinic, somebody will only like to go in on a Thursday because that clinician is their hero. But when you go out into the real world, you realize things like the first rib doesn't really come out of place, or the SIJ doesn't, go somewhere. So in university, they're your hero. But when you go out in the real world, pick a new one and then learn from them.
Yeah, I like that. And where can people find you? What's the easiest way to follow you or get in contact if they need to?
Yeah, so I do Somerset Osteo, or I think it's Osteo, Somerset Osteopath. But me and Rob are now trying to bridge the gaps from our university to where we are now. So we're just trying to start up something new. I think we're going to go with something like Rehab Think Tank, and then that's going to be nice. We're going to try and create like a clinical reasoning, rehab, and manual therapy all in one, and how to use it to treat like the stuff that I've learned from the hospital and he's learned from where he works.
And you guys currently have a podcast, right?
Yeah, we dabbled in it, and then we got very lazy. So we dabbled in it, got very lazy, and we will eventually get it back together, but just life goes mental sometimes, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
Next thing you know, it's a new year.
Oh, that's great, man. I look forward to seeing you guys do that, because I'm sure it'll be really, really great. You guys both have fantastic insights when it comes to rehab and working with patients, so I'm looking forward to that. But thank you very much for being on the podcast. It was really awesome to get your perspective.
That's a pleasure.
And we'll absolutely have you back. I'll post obviously your information or your Instagram in the show notes. We'll also be sharing a lot of this on Instagram, so check that out. Otherwise, you can watch it on YouTube, listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. So be sure to tune in for this one, the next one, and the ones to come, because we'll get Jaimie back on, because there's so much good stuff to talk about, isn't there? If you enjoyed this, though, comment below, let us know. But yeah, other than that, thank you again, man. We really appreciate your time. It's a Sunday night for you, 9:50 for you lads. So get some sleep, get some rest, and really appreciate you, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll get you back on the podcast.
Mate, nice meeting you, Jane. Nice meeting you, mate.
Oh, Andrew, mate. Yeah, I feel like because I've watched these quite a lot, read your books and done the courses, I kind of feel like, oh, that's you. But special.
Awesome stuff. Well, next time I'm in Somerset, I'll look you up, man.
Yeah, bro.
Awesome. Take it easy.
Each episode, we're going to dive into evidence-based strategies, cutting-edge research, and real-world insights to help you elevate your practice and empower your clients. Okay, so welcome to the Rehab Blueprint podcast.